you know, if you have a friend who's from a different culture, you send a message to them, and that message is interpreted through a symbol system of, you send a card message, but they interpret it through their understanding of cards. And so it's like each of you has a set of glasses on. You know, one culture is looking at the symbol through their own cultural understanding of what that symbol means. And the other culture is looking at it through their filter. And so, using this analogy, it's like this one has circular glasses and this one has square glasses on. And so, even though you send the message, they interpret it according to what that symbol, they interpret your symbol. They have to decode it. Because none of us can think what we mean and the other person get our thought. We have to clothe our thought, we have to code it in a message that uses symbol systems. So I'm using different kinds of symbol systems here to talk to you. And I'm going to talk about all the different symbol systems that I'm using in talking to you. Like you can accept, you know, the symbol of the cross in your culture, but the meaning might not, you know, the actual meanings might not change. And so like in Latin America, you know, there was, when people from the Roman Catholic Western Church brought the gospel, they replaced local gods with images of saints. And so in a sense you could say that the name changed, but the form of a saint, the meaning for many of those people was it was still just another name for the god or the goddess that they already worshipped. You see what I mean? So often you can change the form, but the meaning doesn't change. They give it their own meaning. So if you're going to bring the gospel, you need to focus on that inner part of changing the way they view reality. That's what worldview is, or the way they view truth, which is what beliefs have to do with. There's three kinds of messages that you always send. There's always three kinds of messages. And I put them in a little triangle like this because the one on top is the obvious one. I'm sending you messages now about cross-cultural communication. Okay? And so that's my intention, to teach about three kinds of messages. That's the content. But if I've got an upset stomach and I'm in pain as I'm talking, how do you interpret that? You see, because there's another message that's being communicated, is that I'm uncomfortable while I'm talking to you. So the question is, why is he uncomfortable? You see, I am coding my discomfort, but unconsciously. You know, the way I stand, you know, or whatever. And so you're trying to think, you know, is he sick? Does he not like us? You know, it's like, you know, you're trying to figure out what that emotional message means. So there's the cognitive message of what I'm intending to say, but there's also the emotional message about what I feel about what I'm saying. Now, have you ever had a teacher who stands up there and just kind of talks like this, and I'm talking about cross-cultural communication, you know, and the content is all there, but something about the body language or the tone of voice is communicating maybe he doesn't want to be here. He's bored. He's tired of teaching. He doesn't like teaching. You know, and so you start paying attention to that other message rather than what he's saying. Now, you're always communicating on an emotional level, whether you like it or not. You can't be without emotion. And even if you try to be without emotion, like, for example, my daughter joined the Orthodox Church with her husband. And one of the things they like to do in the Orthodox Church when they read scriptures is they read it like this. You know, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And the purpose of that is to strip the scriptural reading of human emotion so only the spiritual message gets across. Well, nice try. You know, because if you're not used to that and you hear somebody, you're going to conclude other things about that it's not trying to get rid of emotion. You're thinking, this is just a bunch of religion and the guy his heart's not in it. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. But see, that may not be the way he's feeling, but he's having to use this form because he's not supposed to communicate his own ideas of emotions, but in doing so, you interpret it how? You interpret it as this guy, it's all form for him. There's no heart in his Christianity. But that may not be true. But that's the way it comes across to you. Because you have to figure out, you have to decode that emotional message or lack of emotion somehow. Right? And so you see all the possibilities so far. There's more and more possibilities as we go for misunderstanding what someone is trying to say. This one Ghanaian guy was saying, he says, sermons, they're too short. I said, why? He said, well, you got to preach until we feel it. You know? You got to sing until we feel it. You know? Because it's, and so if the preacher has been trained in a culture where you have to strip the emotion and it's just got to be very rational and, you know, reasoned, and you're trying to convince the mind, someone who comes from Ghana is going to go, I'm not coming back here. These people, their heart's not in it. Because you got to preach until I feel it. Right? And so you conclude and judge the person that they're not really committed Christians because they don't have the emotion added to, you know, they are not using the symbols to communicate emotion that I'm used to seeing that goes with a sermon. Do you get it? And so that brings us to the third message, and that is judging. And so he's feeling an emotion, he decodes it, but when he gives feedback, there's a judgment that goes with it, which is kind of like, you know, it's like, I'm just closing myself off to this. Forget it. It's, you know, and, or else, you know, there can be different ways. There's judging, where you're judging and saying, this is not worthwhile to me, because we are always evaluating messages. And we are, like, even a speaker, like a teacher, when I'm talking, I'm evaluating you. Now, why is that wrong? Well, there's the extreme form of judging, where I'm thinking, you know, this person's got his eyes closed, he's being disrespectful, and he doesn't, you know, he's not really interested in learning. And it could be that he's got a headache, and it's a lot easier to concentrate if he has his eyes closed. You see what I mean? But the positive side of evaluation is I'm looking for feedback. You know, a good teacher is trying to see how are people, you know, responding. Are they getting it? Am I connecting? That's an evaluative function. You're evaluating whether people are tracking with you or not. So you see, every time I'm doing this, I'm communicating with all three. Now, there's different ways of evaluating. I can suddenly ask you a question, and I'll say, Moses, what do you think about this? And it's like, that could be a positive thing for you if you're used to questions being asked, but it could be a negative thing because, I'm on the spot, you know, what if I say the wrong answer, you know, and it's a personal question, or, you know, there's all kinds of ways that you can respond to my attempt to get feedback and evaluate whether I'm getting through or not. You can interpret it completely a different way. And that could be conscious or unconscious. But just think about it if you're just talking to somebody, that we all always have a tendency to evaluate the other person in some way or another.